leading civil society at the time that were just super strategic. One of them, in one case was from a very wealthy family and was like kind of communist. So he had like all the freedom and like intellectual and financial freedom to be a sort of visionary leader. And
financial freedom to be a communist. I love it.
Right. Well, there's the reason they have these terms, champagne socialist, or I think in German it's caviar communist, or like it takes a certain amount of material comfort to be able to think big and not care about projects and donors and fundraising and all of that. And I don't think that's present anymore, but I think that was just a nice, like, rare moment. And so I think I think the difference now is that when we started working in Ghana, there was a sort of civil society strategy and group. And so we could just work with them and they kind of knew what they wanted. And now, at least as far as Fern is concerned, our partner EcoCare, they're a really new organization. They're actually formed out of staff that left the NGO that was founded by the rich communist who is now run off and is doing other projects. So they kind of were just looking for stuff to work on. And I think they kind of chose to work on cocoa because they could see something was happening and that we were interested and the EU was interested. I don't think they came into it with this is what's wrong in the cocoa sector and this is what we want to see change. And it sounds like it's maybe similarly the case with Send as well, where we have sort of chosen to work with them because we think they have good sort of convening power and good way of working with others. But I don't think anyone's really coming into this with a really clear political vision. And I think that this is an issue. And so recently what we've been trying to do is, actually it's the wife of the rich communist. So she's also a super strategic woman, Emilia, who's now, working to support the platform to try to be a bit clearer on strategy. Both she and her husband are very strategic. And she's been around for a very, very long time. So I'm hoping that would maybe help be a bit clearer around objectives. But, so that's like that. Anyway, I hope that's useful in some way.
That is really useful. In fact, what you describe happening in the timber sector is sort of what would be cool to see happen in the cocoa sector. Except I do have, you signaled the pause, right? This what about the national interests? Are we pushing them to do this? And, I have to say, I do think that we need to be looking at how to open up space for them. And, it was interesting when I talked to Sandra and I talked to Gawu and I did my interviews, I start by asking them overall about their organization. And they both were interested in being able to talk about everything they did, not just cocoa. And Gawu is very clear that, we shouldn't be just looking at cocoa, we should be looking at the communities. And so the questions I have is, yes, we want to leverage the cocoa pressure points, and the timber case is interesting for that. But we also want to be opening up space for them to drive the change they want to drive. And so on one level, the timber case sounds interesting because it sounds like it enabled national level advocacy to move forward. In Ivory Coast, I don't know what your experience is, but I find a lot of groups are quite afraid to speak out against in any critical way. And even Ghana, I think they're careful, right? They try to be, I haven't heard them, they're not sort of stridently against the government, not like some of our partners in Asia, for example.
I think it depends on the person. Obed can definitely be quite confrontational towards the government.
Communist?
No, Obed's the guy from EcoCare, and Chetri definitely can be very outspoken. But that was kind of the culture of that organization that was created by this guy because he was really outspoken, and so the people who worked for that organization are also quite maybe a bit more outspoken than other people are.
Yeah, I would fully agree that in Côte d'Ivoire people are less, outspoken. on certain issues. And I think the whole NGO CSO landscape is less developed than in Ghana. I mean, just looking, we made like an analysis on possible CSOs in Cote d'Ivoire, and there was just a few organizations that actually were on our radar, while in Ghana there were like so many NGOs, farmers organizations we could have, approached and talked with. I think in Ghana, I feel like the CSOs are kind of feeling that they don't want doors that have maybe opened a little bit to be shut down again. So if they have a contact to COCOBOD or to the government, they don't want that this contact get loose just because they say something wrong. And that makes them very diplomatic in many places. And but I mean, they also made the experience, like 1.5 years ago, the GCCP was really criticizing the head of COCOBOD on what he said at an event in Switzerland on deforestation. And sent as the coordinator, they received some calls that COCOBOD will never talk with them again, basically because of the press release. And I mean, with the time, that issue could be solved, and COCOBOD obviously is talking with them. And but yeah, I mean, it's not there's very much a power disbalance, and it's not like a dialogue where civil society is on the same level like the other stakeholders. I think that's definitely a question of power. And I mean, if COCOBOD is willing to speak with them, yes, they do. But if not, they have very little influence to do that. And maybe, yes, here the European Commission can play a role to push for that and should play a role. But so far, it's not quite decided yet on where this whole process with the European Commission will lead to.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I wonder if COCOBOD would have gone back to talking to SEND if SEND weren't still playing this central role, right? I mean, that's the whole crux of my question is like, to what extent do the transnational coalitions help open up that space for them? And is the space that's open the space they want? So, I mean, it sounds like, and in general, I've been hearing back, yes, it helps. It's a piece of the space they want. And so concretely, I have this idea of pulling together a conversation where I'd like to feature the groups from the region and have the key civil society groups in the US and EU come together and really hear them on what their strategies are and then reflect on how that impacts. And it sounds like since you've been having these monthly calls, I don't want to repeat any of this, but I did propose, and I think it's best if this is done sort of with the Voice Network, but Anthony said he wouldn't make any decisions unless you two were agreeing, because you two have been the ones that are talking most regularly to groups in the region. And just to not make it super long, I mean, ideally we would have like a multi-day conference where we could all really sort of build strategies together. But I think the one thing that could be interesting to talk about is the living income differential, which is a government policy that exists. And, so it's not like telling the government do something different. It's more, okay, government, you said you want to do this. How are you going to implement it? And who's monitoring it? And how are people getting informed? So that could be one way to sort of just narrow the conversation a little bit to sort of, let's call it constructive engagement with the government. It's a little bit like, what are you doing about it? How is this going piece? Um,